mental health can be a great concern, as well as their physical health. Hopefully, this discussion will help exchange ideas from both sides of the Pacific and two different cultures. I hope we can support each other via each individual's narratives and coping techniques through these challenging times. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Negron. I am a psychotherapist here in New York City. I would like everyone to go around to do a basic introduction of who everyone is. Like, who are you? What do you do? And what has been your very basic experience so far with the lockdown? I want to start with Miss Tracy.
Hey guys, I'm Tracy. I'm working as a project manager and a part-time tattoo artist. I have been in lockdown for the past actually 2 days, but we've been like staying at home and working from home for 2 weeks already.
Hello, my name is Mia. I'm a account strategist in the advertising industry. I've been in lockdown for, I guess, adding up about 2 weeks now. But in between, there's intersessions where I get to shop and I get to do some grocery shopping too. But I've been working from home since almost a month ago because our office building is locked down.
I'm an engineer, electrical engineer, and I've currently quit my job to start my own business. This venture has been going on for 2 months, and I've been in lockdown for a month already. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I know all of us have experience with lockdowns. You three are currently in China. The other three of us are here in New York. So our experience has been much different. At least currently it's much different. Colleen, can you give us a little about yourself and what your experiences have been so far with lockdowns?
Yes, I'm Colleen. I am a school social worker at an elementary school in Brooklyn. I was in Shanghai, China at the beginning of the COVID pandemic in 2020, and I was in a lockdown for 2 weeks, I think 14 days. It was actually in a pretty flexible building though, and was still able to leave to go on walks. But yeah, I would say that's my experience with an official lockdown.
So hello, I'm Patrick. I'm a student right now at a Master's of Social Work program, and I'm an intern at a middle high school here in New York. My experience with lockdowns are kind of similar to what Colleen said. I was overseas too. I was in Albania when COVID hit, and then I had to come back to the US. And so I was in lockdown here for 14 days as well. And I think here it seems like it was a little more flexible. We could definitely leave and like go for walks and things like that, but couldn't go to stores, couldn't go to restaurants. So yeah, a little different, I guess.
I think I see lockdown similar because like Colleen, I was in China when COVID first hit, and the lockdowns there, at least my lockdown is pretty extreme. I was there for 2 or 3 weeks and I couldn't even leave my building. Food had to be delivered to my lobby. I couldn't even go outside to feel sunlight. So lockdowns was pretty intense there for 3 weeks. And then I came back to America and we had a lockdown, but not nearly as strict it was in New York. So I could still go out, but a lot of the places were closed, still face masks everywhere. And it was pretty restricted in general, but not nearly as restricted as my experience of lockdown in Shanghai. How would you rate your mental health status before the lockdowns, during the lockdowns, and after the lockdowns? Like, how has it changed over the course of those 3 different states?
I'll go first. Since I've locked down the most. My mental health is, how would I put it? It's not great. It's not great. Because this Omicron strain is actually very transmissible. So, and it's very difficult to predict when we're going to be out of lockdown. So every time they say it's another 3 days, another 3 days. For me, I have had another 20 days on top of my existing lockdown already. So that has been quite detrimental to my emotional state, because as I'm expecting to go outside, they just hit me with another news saying that you can't go out anymore. And then initially we were able to walk around in our compound, but as time progressed, that also was restricted. So they don't limit your freedom immediately. They limit it in sequences and stages until you can't go out anymore. You sort of don't have any hope in terms of when you're going to know that you will be outside. And the lockdown's quite extreme over here because when you look at the streets through your balcony, there's like no cars, no people. It's a barren ghost city, and it feels very distant. You feel very distant from everyone. Yeah. And
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
sure.
Do you find it more frustrating now than 2 years ago? My thought process is like, we didn't know anything at the beginning, and lockdown was hard for me, but it was like, we don't know, like this is deadly. We have no information. But now we have a lot of science and information and a lot of people vaccinated. So we've kind of taken away, not entirely, but like the risk of death, like the extreme part of it. And it's like, we know so much more. And at least what we're being told is like, you can be outside and stuff. So do you find it harder now that it's like your lockdown very similar to 2020 when we didn't know anything?
The amount of fear is definitely different. And during the initial outbreak of COVID, you are definitely drawing parallels with SARS, which is very deadly. So it's not so much that government locking you down. It's more like you don't want to go outside. But for this one, which we know that the strain isn't very deadly and the symptoms are relatively mild for a certain age group, you tend to feel like it's just wearing on your mind that you can't go outside. Yeah, it's just, there isn't that much fear for Omicron. It's just mostly you being alone in a space, being confined. It's very much like solitary confinement.
I feel like it's not really the fear for the virus now. It's more like you don't want to get tested positive because you wouldn't know like where would they put you after you're tested positive. Like people were moved into those hospitals where all the positive people go there, and they just lock you down over there, and they don't really get enough medical support also. So I think that's like I'm not afraid of getting infected, but I'm afraid of the consequences after that. And you really don't know like when will they let you out. For me, I'm in lockdown with two of my friends, so I'm not feeling that depressed, but I have friends who are in lockdowns alone, and they are like waiting for the governments to send them food and vegetables. So I can see that they would be really in a depressing mode, during these lockdowns.
I know my experience. I was alone for my quarantine, and it was rough. It was very rough. I know I saw my mental health go from, okay, actually pretty good before quarantine, this plummet during the lockdowns. And it took a while for me to start feeling even a resemblance of normal once lockdowns, they ended.
So, I mean, kind of similar to you, I would say before lockdown, my mental health was pretty good. And I feel like I was kind of going in a good direction overall. And then I feel like when lockdown happened that, everything changed. And it definitely went south for a while, because it, I think one thing the pandemic did is it put like all of our goals and dreams like on pause. You know what I mean? Like, and you kind of felt like you weren't moving forward in life in the same way you were before. So that definitely was difficult to kind of adjust to. And I would say coming out of the pandemic, it definitely improved, but there was like an adjustment period that happened after lockdown, because like, especially around like interacting with other people, because social skills are skills, and they can kind of decline if you're on your own for a while.
Oh, I can 100% agree with that. I felt like
it's like
socially
being crowded
incompetent after
spaces
lockdown.
again, and and like, even talking to people in like restaurants or class, it's like you kind of forget how to do that, or it's not as natural anymore. So it kind of took some getting used to after a while.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the same too. I've had like 3 major lockdowns. One is when this whole thing started, when I was in Canada with my boyfriend. So we were like locked down for almost actually over a year, just the two of us. And back then it was like most out of fear that stopped us from walking outside, or just, lock ourselves within our rooms. But then when I came back from Canada to China, I also had a 21 days of quarantine by myself, which I guess compared to now, it was still okay, because you sort of like know after this certain period, you're going to be out free, and then the environment itself is okay. But then I feel like this time is really different. Oh, and also right after that 21 days quarantine, I started to see people and started to like socialize with others. I find myself to have like very major social anxiety. I sweat over talking to my cousins who were like really close to me, but then I actually get like palm sweat or whatever just by talking to them, which kind of like I really took some time to adjust myself from, kind of like a isolated place to start to communicate or like socialize with others. But I feel like this time it's really, really devastating for me, because I've just started to readjust my lifestyle. I've just started to sort of like getting used to being somewhat normal. But then this whole thing started, and then people were like all sort of like panicking, and they were all like shopping for food. And I was like, at first I was like, yeah, it's probably nothing. It's probably just false alarm again. And we're going to be over it for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 days. But then it all really started to hit me like within a very, very short period. So I guess that really, it was like 2 weeks ago when our offices closed down. And then I started to be really panicking, because, everything is sort of like crashing down again. And I feel like the experience from 2 years ago, it's coming back. So it's sort of like, I don't know, it's like living your worst nightmare one more time. So that is really difficult for me, I guess.
I guess that leads me into the second part of that question is, once lockdown is done, once this experience that you guys are going through again, do you remember what it felt like to have that sense of freedom, that sense of like going outside and be able to do what you want to do? I know for me, it was pretty intense after my 3 weeks of quarantine. Shanghai was slowly opening up, and just going out and getting like, some noodles at a restaurant was like an amazing euphoric experience to getting like, food with other human beings outside. And I remember just feeling like almost high in a way of this, like that excitement of being out and be able to interact with people again. And I remember like me and Colleen, we met at a bar for a drink after I had finally was able to leave my complex. And I remember the sheer happiness of seeing Colleen smile at the other end of the table as I walk up. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is my friend. This is somebody that I know. This is somebody that I want to hang out with. And like that, just euphoric feeling.
I felt the same way, like this appreciation for the little things. But also I feel like because it wasn't normal, it was a new normal, there was still like a weird sense of fear. Like I felt like I might get in trouble, I might do something wrong. And yeah, I can understand, like, I probably had it like, oh, if I get this virus that's still a thing, like, that's going to be really inconvenient and like what could happen. So I think there was always like a little fear. And I remember being in China when we had the QR codes and like when we traveled, and it's like, you didn't know if the city you were going to might be having like a little flare up and then your QR code would turn from green to red. Like that was always in the back of my mind all the time. So it was like a weird mix of like euphoria, but also like what's going on. And I still kind of feel like I don't feel like I've ever gotten back to my mental state before COVID hit.
I feel like I've always been the lucky one, because when this whole thing first started, I was in Ithaca and the situation wasn't that bad over there. And when I come back to China, I went to Hong Kong first, and the quarantine policies over there was not that strict either. So actually my friends came over to my house and visit me during my quarantine time. So this is actually like now is actually my first real lockdown. Like I can't get out of my house and nobody can come over and visit me either. So but during like after the 14 days of quarantine back when I was in Hong Kong, the feeling of coming out of the quarantine was also really great, because that was the first time I can see my dad. Like I haven't seen him for like a year almost before that. So yeah, and it was just great to see all of my friends back then. But yeah, this is the first real lockdown that I'm experiencing, actually.
You consider yourself very lucky. I feel like most of us are at number 2 and 3.